Well, the situation in Bangladesh clearly a matter of grave concern for both countries. We are now joined by a very special guest, Harsh Vardhan Shringla, India's G20 Sherpa. He's also been the Foreign Secretary of India and has served in Dhaka as our High Commissioner. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. In a statement a little while back, the External Affairs Ministry says that they are deeply concerned at the arrest and denial of bail to Sri Chinmay Krishna Das. How does this episode mark the latest concern that India has as far as attacks or justice being denied to minorities in Bangladesh is concerned?
Thank you, Vishnu. Over the past 3 to 4 months since the interim administration has been, in power in Bangladesh, we have seen a number of attacks on minorities, particularly Hindus, across the country. There have been a number of incidents that have been noted. The various spokespersons for the interim administration and others who are sympathetic to the current administration have been saying that these incidents are not systemic or egregious. They are isolated incidents, but what really is emerging is a pattern of intolerance, which is eroding the secular fabric that was envisaged originally in Bangladesh in 1971 and continued to be part of Bangladesh's constitution over a period of time. So obviously there is concern, with regard to not only the latest incident that you're referring to, but also past incidents where various members of the minority community, especially Hindus, have been targeted. And here in this particular case, of course, this seems to be an extrajudicial sort of activity, one that, should be very, very roundly condemned, but also I think there should be recourse. And as the Ministry of External Affairs has very correctly pointed out, that, instead of bringing to book those perpetrators of violence against minorities, you're actually going and arresting someone who is using peaceful means to voice certain concerns that are already out there, on the table.
And I think the concern in this particular case is the allegation of treason. Treason by a person who apparently was trying to suggest that there are protests against attacks on minorities. And the statement of the External Affairs Ministry also says there have been multiple attacks on Hindus and other minorities by extremist elements in Bangladesh. What is your overall sense on where this country is going?
Well, I mean, there is a sense that, those who have benefited most from the fall of Sheikh Hasina's government have been Islamists, have been more radical elements which have, been part of the political and social landscape of Bangladesh. Not only the Jamaat-e-Islami, but organizations like the Hizb ut-Tahrir, the Jamaat-e-Mujahideen Bangladesh, the Hizbul Ansar, elements that identify with Al-Qaeda, the ISIS, elements that look at this as an opportunity to achieve their aims of establishing an Islamic caliphate in Bangladesh, and will use any means possible to try and achieve their aims. And I think that is the concern, that you're seeing a sort of a slippery slope towards more radicalism, fundamentalism, and essentially, many of these elements taking control of the reins of power directly or indirectly. The interim administration, in its own way, headed by Professor Yunus, I think has tried to be fair in some senses, but clearly, some of these organizations have infiltrated the administration. They're very influential, and they filled in the vacuum left by the Awami League and the Sheikh Hasina government very effectively. And I would say in many senses also in an insidious way to take over both the institutions that influence thought and opinion, such as the media, educational institutions, universities, etc., as well as to some extent influence those in power in how they should conduct themselves. And here you see, as the situation deteriorates, there is very little that the interim administration is doing or has to say about this deteriorating law and order situation deteriorating, a situation with regard to minorities, the growing intolerance that you see in society, and as I said, the erosion of the social fabric, which is so important, in Bangladesh, for Bangladesh's polity and society.
Where does that leave India's relations with Dhaka, which were arguably our closest relationship just a few months back in the region?
So early on in the game, I had said that India's two major concerns would be one, that terrorism and extremism should not, be a cross-border exercise at our, expense, which should not be detrimental to India's core security interests, especially in northeastern India. And the second should be that, attacks on minorities, especially Hindus, should not be allowed and should be certainly, controlled or brought under control by the interim administration to avoid a situation where India is forced to comment and, take up with the government of Bangladesh. Unfortunately, that seems to be the case. And I think unless these two issues are kept in check, I think we will see more of, comments of this nature and more, I think, proactivism on the Indian side to deal with what would be a very challenging situation for the government of India.
Ambassador Shringla, the fact is that we also have very limited consular services now available. To think that we are barely able to process visas other than, in an emergency situation for Bangladeshis looking to come to our country, sort of gives you an idea of how serious the situation is. In terms of the overall relationship that we now have with Bangladesh, where would you place it?
Well, I think in many senses, the government of India has been quite, I would say, has held its opinions on the situation for quite some time. Has not commented or made any references to what would be an internal situation in Bangladesh. But at the same time, obviously, the situation is also not what it used to be. There is very little, activity from the point of view of people-to-people movement and contacts, cultural exchanges, trade and economic exchanges, and so it's a situation that is more like a holding operation, but not one that is adversarial. But obviously, if, as I said, these two are, I think, on the top of India's agenda, I would suppose they should be on the top of India's agenda, are not sort of controlled or taken into account by the interim administration and by those who control the reins of power today in Bangladesh, I'm afraid the situation could then deteriorate at a bilateral level.
All right, Ambassador Shringla, very important words over there, as the situation with Bangladesh appears to be much more tense, to say the least, with attacks on minority members in that country. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your views. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.